and dear friends in the Dhamma. So I'm again very glad to be back here in Malaysia after about 6 months, and then to give this series of talks. And today we are going to deal with a little bit of a difficult topic, something that is very relevant to our days. That is what draws people to violence. When we see incidents of violent behaviors and violent acts happening all around the world, and we really question how it is possible for people to do such violent acts. It can be a really surprising thing when we only focus on the behavior, the outward behavior of these people. But I think we also need to equally to pay attention to the process through which a person will come to such a aggressive and violent expression. So when such a violent thing happens, and we always surprise and we always, try to blame the person or people, but there's a whole larger process that bring anyone to such a place. Sometimes, even without our knowing, we can be a part of that whole process also. Sometimes our casual conversations, our simple stereotypes can play an important part in gradually feeding this behavior in many people. So therefore, what we want to deal a little bit deeper into this whole idea today with the help of the teachings of the Buddha, why actually people ended up being violent. So we find a very interesting discourse of the Buddha. Actually, where Buddha was asked the same question, very interesting question, not by one of his disciples actually, but by a special person called Sakka. Do you know who is Sakka? The king of the Devas. So now today we are talking about problems that we have here in the human world, why people why people act violently, why people have violent acts and quarrels and disputes. Looks like, it's not only we who have this problem. Looks like even the Sakka, the Devas also have the same problem. Yes, so we shouldn't be surprised, to see that why we are behaving like this. It looks like, in other realms also, people, not people, the beings are get into quarrels and troubles and fight each other. The question he asks, Devas, Nagas, Asuras, Gandharvas, and also humans. These are different classes of beings living in the cosmos, in the universe. So all these classes of beings, including humans, whatever different types of communities are there, it occurs to them that they ought to live without mutual hatred, violence, enmity, or malice. Yet, all they live with mutual hatred, violence, enmity, and malice. What is the reason for this? How do conflict arise? So the question is that we all want to live in harmony, in peace, in concord. Not only we, but actually looks like even Devas, Nagas, Asuras, all classes of beings are interested in staying at peace, in concord. But despite our needs to be in such harmony and peace, what we encounter all the time is this mutual hatred, conflict, and quarrels. And that was the concern. I think this is a concern not only for the Sakya, but I think for all of us also. And he requested the Buddha, please can you explain why, how the conflicts arise? So the answer to this can be really helpful. So what we really need to understand that when Buddha gave answer to this question, Buddha did not really categorize people or beings as being naturally violent. And his answer is more of giving causes and conditions, how a society, a community can be like that. So there are a number of causes and conditions are operation to bring such a violence to a society. So the Buddhist explanation is more like a causal explanation. Doesn't mean that there are certain kinds of people who are violent. Normally, when we talk about these issues, we like to categorize people, we like to stereotype people, or people from that part of the world are always like that. People belong to that religion is always like that. People belong to that nationality is always like that. So we think that somehow, some people have inherently that kind of violent nature. That is how normally, we like to see it. But the Buddha's explanation is quite different. His explanation is that everyone is equally vulnerable to become violent if he or she go through the same conditionings and same social environment and same causes and conditions. So the good example would be even we have a very popular story in the Buddhist literature about how such an innocent person become the most violent person in the world. Not in the world, those days in the world. Can anybody has any idea who is the innocent person became a violent person at the time of the Buddha? Angulimala. That's the name. Actually, that is not his original name. Right? But he is known as Angulimala, right? What is the meaning of the term Angulimala? What is Anguli? Fingers. Mala? Garland. Because he used to wear a garland of human fingers. So he was such a violent person. But if you really see his history, his life story, that shows us how anybody can become a violent person. And his original name was Ahinsaka. What is the meaning of word Ahinsaka? Non-violence. Hinsaka means violent. Ahinsaka means non-violence. That was his original name. Ahinsaka. He was such an innocent, kind, compassionate young boy. So he was named Ahinsaka, a non-violent one. But what happened to him? So unfortunately, we don't have much detail of what really brought him to that kind of violent act. But what we know is that he was a very clever student, and he went to study in those days, to learn all the archeries and other required skills for a king, for a prince. So he was studying with other students, and he was so good, very good. And then all other students got jealous about him, and so they made a plan, right? And they told the teacher that this young student having an affair with the wife of the teacher. So, gossiping, and, slandering. And so they actually planned and they gave such a bad name. And then what happened at the end? You have any question? And then, so what happened is that teacher and wanted to really get rid of Ahinsaka, the non-violent one. But then when he made a plan, not really throwing him away, but made a plan that he will get into trouble. So he asked him, demanded him, if you want to complete your training as a teacher's payment or the teacher's gift, if you want to graduate, you want to give me a gift of 1,000 fingers of. So according to this story, that is how he started to go around and killing beings and got these fingers. There should have been much more conditions to this story, but unfortunately we don't know. But exactly we know that according to the suttas, there's a sutta called Angulimala Sutta, where the Buddha described his meeting with this person and how Buddha actually tamed him. So before that, what really happened is not really clear. We only have a few details. But what we can learn is that such an innocent person can become a really violent person. It's a destroyer of villages. People start to call him destroyer of villages. And he has no mercy at the end. He was going after any human being he can meet and killing them and collecting their fingers. Some scholars think that he joined a kind of cult. Or maybe he was conditioned, he was conditioned to come to that kind of mental state. But what is important for us to know what happened to him later? He was originally an innocent boy and went through so many other conditionings and maybe brainwashing, we can say. Maybe who knows, the teacher brainwashed him or his colleagues brainwashed him. It's possible. Our mind can be so vulnerable, we can have that kind of conditioning all the while and put us into that kind of conditioning. And then he became such a bandit, killing, so many human beings. And then what happened? He met the Buddha. And we know this story, how, Buddha was able to use his psychic powers to, move very fast, but the Angulimala has to run behind the Buddha. He had no problem of catching any person before. It said that he was able to catch deer who are running, and he was such a fast, strong person. But this time he couldn't catch the Buddha. He was running after the Buddha very fast and faster. Buddha was with his psychic powers moving faster than him. At the end, he got really exhausted and tired. With angry voice, he shouted, "Stop the contemplative. Stop the monk." And then the Buddha used that very expression, "stop," to teach him, "I have already stopped. You are the one who are still running." But by that time, actually, Angulimala was, has fallen on the ground. He has stopped, and he was confused. What you are telling me? I have already, fallen down, and you are the one who was moving fast. But you say that you have stopped, and I have not stopped. And Buddha used that window, that opportunity to explain him. Look at your own mind. See how fast your mind is running now. How fast your mind is running now, how agitated your mind is now, and how you are burning with this violence and anger. And then Okay, let us all wish him healing, good health. So when Buddha used that opportunity to explain him to have a self-reflection for the first time, he was able to see his own mind and see how boiling was it, how uncomfortable was it. And he, for the first time, he was able to look into himself. He realized that this was so bad. And he realized that, in fact, he has not stopped. And so then he was ready to listen to the Buddha more and more, and Buddha continued to teach him and teach him that, how he can make his mind calm and comfortable by learning how to, get rid of these feelings. And then eventually he became a disciple of the Buddha. And then another miracle happened. He was practicing with the Buddha, and every day he will get instruction from the Buddha, and Buddha really wanted to help him to transform his mind completely. And then, and Buddha was teaching him loving kindness. And then after a while, practicing under the instruction of the Buddha, he was able to transform completely from a violent person to a practicing monk, and he became a monk. And at the end, he became one of the most compassionate monks in the Buddha's community. And he became such compassionate, actually. And after his practicing, and he was going with his arms ball, and he trained his mind to the point that people who first afraid of him, whenever they saw him, even in his robes, they were throwing stones and sticks at him. And he get wounded. And he get all the bloody face and body. And he came to the Buddha with bloody face and bloody body. Buddha trained him. Even though you get a blow of a stick, even though you get a hit from a stone, never let any anger arise in your mind. That is such a profound training. He was able to transform his mind to that extent, even though people were throwing so many, things at him. He was able to take all of them and feel them, but not have any angry resistance in his heart. And one day, he was able to develop his mind to that extent. One day, he was again going out with his ball for his arms round, and he saw a pregnant mother. A pregnant mother was having such a pain, the pain of labor, but not really delivering the baby, having such a deep pain, but having difficulty in delivering. And he has developed his mind to that extent that he felt so compassionate, so compelling to help this mom. His mind has completely changed. He went back to the Buddha and asked what I can do. I really wanted to help this mom. Buddha told him, go back and do a blessing and do what we call satya kriya, an act of truth. That means if you follow certain moral principles in your life, some virtues in your life, you can use your virtues, your good qualities, as a power. And Buddha asked him, okay, go back and then make an act of truth that in my life I have never killed or even have not thought to kill any living beings. If this is true, by the virtue of truthfulness, by the power of the truth of this quality, may she be able to relieve from that pain and deliver the baby smoothly. And then Angulimala, monk, said to Buddha, how can I do that? I have killed so many people. When the Buddha said that, now you have a new life. You are no more Angulimala. You can do an act of truth. From the day that I was born into the disciplehood of the Buddha, from the day that I became a monk, from that day onwards, I have not killed or even have not thought to kill any living beings. If this is true, by the power of this truth, may she be able to relieve from the pain and deliver the baby. So he learned new way of doing the act of truth, focusing on a specific period of his life that he has given up that violence. And he went back. The mother was still in pain, screaming. The monks kneeled down in front of this mom. And then start to chant. And then did that act of truth. From the day that I became a monk, from that day onwards until now, I have never killed or harmed, even thought to kill any living beings. If this is true, if this virtue is really true, by the power of this truth, may she be able to deliver the baby. She did. She did. And then it became a custom in the Buddhist tradition that whenever we meet pregnant mothers, we still up to today, we do the same chant that the monk Angulimala did. We call Angulimala Parita. So when mothers are pregnant, that is the chant we do. We remember what monk Angulimala did, and then we repeat the same chant, and we also reflect our own quality, our own non-violent quality. From the day that we became a monk, we have never killed or have never even thought to kill any living being. If that is true, may this mother have a smooth delivery. So imagine now, he was a bandit, the person who's wearing the fingers of human beings, and then eventually became an ideal of compassion. And even we are practicing, even today, after 26 centuries, even still monks are chanting the same chant to help pregnant mothers. Imagine how much transformation happened in that personality. So now we see the full coming up of this personality. He was a non-violent, innocent boy and became one of the most violent bandit person, and then became again a completely compassionate monk. So imagine what can happen to human personality. So all based on what kind of things that we are exposed to, what kind of people that we are associating, what kind of teachers that you will meet. So our human mind is very vulnerable and is open to conditionings. The only way to prevent from conditioning is the mindfulness. If you do not have that self-awareness and strong mindfulness, you are vulnerable. Your mind can be conditioned. And particularly these days, it is very easy to condition your mind through media, particularly through social media. Because, through social media, day by day, every day, people can feed the same news, and then you can condition your mind. You can develop certain ideas. The danger with social media is that we can actually choose which people to associate, which news to see. Right? And if you are living in a society with normal neighborhood, in a society, you have to learn how to live with everyone. Right? But in social media, you can unfriend people if you don't like. Right? So you only choose people who only approve your opinions. And you unfriend the other people, and you create a circle of friends who will only approve your opinion. You are not open to have other opinion. And you only subscribe to the news sources that somehow feed the news that you like. You shut off to the other news. So imagine that if someone is living life like that, only having the friends who will always approve his opinions and only listening to the news that he likes to hear and not to listen to the other news, he creates a worldview that's is really not realistic, but that kind of world. And that is what is happening to many youngsters today. Many young people, they are not living in actual world. They are not living in actual society. They have created their own virtual world, own virtual friends, and own virtual world, and they live in that world. So, if there are cunning and there are people who have special agendas, they can actually purposely start to feed the same kind of news and condition these young people's mind, and then make them really violent people, if you want. And the good example even recently in the US also, and now people are realizing that actually the social media was used to change the public opinion during the election period, and it's such powerful. People didn't know, but there were some planned agenda, and some companies were actually using social media to feed similar kind of news again and again to targeted groups of people and change their and then influence their public opinion. So we don't know if any company is strong, multinational company want to create the mind, change our mind. They can do it now. They can create certain desires in us to buy certain products. They can create certain tendencies in us to support certain political movement. Yeah, we are all kind of gullible and vulnerable and naive because if you don't practice mindfulness, if you don't start to have that awareness and ability to watch your own mind, we are all equally vulnerable to being used by others. That is what has happened to many people today, particularly younger people. So, when it comes to explanation of the Buddha, why people became violent, that is the explanation. When the Sakka asked this question, and Buddha explained why anybody become violent. And before, actually, Buddha has two different explanations. One is a social origin of violence. Social origin of violence, that not only individual, there's the social background is playing a very important role. So there's a sutta called Kutta Danta Sutta in the long discourse of the Buddha, where Buddha gave a social origin, a causal causes and conditions, social causes and conditions that any society will be more prone to have violence. Buddha said that if the state neglects the needy people, the destitute people in society, and what will happen? Poverty will be increased. There will be more poverty because there's no fair distribution of the wealth. And if you don't take care of those destitute, needy people, there will be more poverty. And when there are more poverty, there will be more stealing and all kind of robberies, all kind of thefts happening. And when these things are happening, there will be definitely violence, and people start to catch those people and create violent and beat. And then of course the state come back and start to punish them. And as a result, there will be more violence. So in one sutta, Buddha gives this social origin, this explanation of the larger society, particularly the economic policies of a state can be a very important factor in making a society violent or not. If an economic system is not fair, definitely a group of people will be deprived from basic needs. And when one group of people is not happy, the whole society cannot be happy. If one group of people in a society is not happy, it is so difficult for other groups of people to be happy and live in harmony. You can't deprive one group of people and make other group of people happy. That's not going to happen. There will always be conflict, problems, and violence. So that is a social origin of violence. But then Buddha went in to explain the other, more deeper explanation of violence. It's called psychological origin of violence. That was the answer given by the Buddha to the Sakka, the king of the Devas. And that is a more deeper explanation how in our own mind we can generate violence. So I start with violence actually. So Buddha said that anybody can be aggressive and violent when we have a sense of defensiveness. When you want to defend something. And so defensiveness comes out of fear. When you have certain fear, and then you become defensive, right? So defensiveness is a result of having a fear of losing something important to you. So the Buddha said that the defensive comes from possessiveness, that you have certain things that you think valuable and you are afraid of losing it, and then you become defensive. So you have something to protect, the possessive, and something to protect that you think that belongs to you. It could be a property that belongs to you. It could be your name, your fame that belongs to you. It could be a country that you think that belongs to you. It could be a religion that you think that belongs to you. It could be anything that you think that belongs to you. And then whenever that thing that you possess, you feel that is your identity. That is you, what you possess that. And then when you feel that it is under threat, and then you can become defensive, and then start violence. And then Buddha went into to explain deeply that how that possessiveness, how that idea of ownership, the possessiveness comes. Possessiveness comes from a very more subtle mental process of discriminating what is dear and what is dear to us, what is not dear to us, or what is mine and what is others. So we try to. There's a subtle process going on in our mind. We divide in the world into two categories, and this is mine and this is not mine. And usually we like to make dear things mine, right, and not dear things like others. So there's a more subtle level of division going on, discriminating, dividing the whole world into two, dear and not dear, or mine and others. And that's what really later give rise to like possessiveness. But the very discrimination happens from a deeper level of mental quality function we call desire or chanda, liking. Like before we discriminate, we have certain liking, and liking something, and that very liking idea occurs due to pondering over something again and again, again and again, again and again. This is a very subtle function happening. If you like something, actually that likeness of something happens as a result of your thinking over and over again. Let's say earlier you didn't see any, we didn't have any desire for cell phones. Maybe 10 years ago. Not really, maybe 20 years ago. Yeah. And then, but what happened, you see this image in the advertisement, in the media, wherever, and you start to think about it. You start to ponder about it again and again, again and again. As a result, the more you ponder about it, and we gradually develop some liking of it. Even when we like people, particularly we think about, let's say younger people, when they like each other, when they like the opposite gender, what is really there is that they meet, they have some exchange, and they go back home and they think again and again, again and again, and ponder over, and that very pondering generates liking. So that's a very subtle level. So this whole, its outward is like violence, but there's so much going on in the deep in our mind. And that pondering or reasoning, the pondering over and over again occurs due to what you call, that's a classical technical term here, perceptions or categories of objectification. That is the translation of what you call in Pali, papancha sanya sankha. In a simple language, fixed concepts and ideologies. So we have fixed concepts and ideologies that we have produced, simple like fixed concepts, and those concepts help us to ponder and think over and over and over. As a result, we develop liking, a desire, and desire will divide the world into two, dear and not dear, and then you generate possessiveness. You will possess some what is dear to you, and then you develop this identity, possessiveness, and like your own, and then you want to protect it. And if anyone is near it, you become really concerned. And if someone is doing something, you become defensive, and then violence. Violence comes as a result of that. This is more like a deeper psychological analysis. But this possessiveness comes not only to the material things, but also to any ideas. Even with regard to our ideas of ourselves, actually. The main possessiveness is a possessiveness of the self, ego, this, and wanting to protect, and not only the self, but also whatever you think that belongs to that self. Our self, the way that we construct ourselves is not only this being, actually, our history, our environment, our family lineage, our country, and all those things are connected to our idea of self. So we need to, once we have that, and we need to protect it, and then we can have threats. Sometimes perceived threats, not real threats, but we think that group of people or that particular movement or whatever thing can be a threat. So you have a perceived threat. Sometimes real threat, sometimes perceived threat. Whether it's a perceived threat or imagined threats or real threats, we become defensive and then can be easily violent. So there's such a long process there. So what we can learn here actually, in order to be free from conflicts, there's much more to do in terms of our training of our mind. Of course, first we need to arrange a social situation that is more fair and just. And then there need to be so much training to be given to individual people. And then particularly help people not to be influenced by so much of social conditioning, so much of media. And then as individuals, we really have to look into our own mind and see how we get angry and aggressive when we have certain possessiveness. And always see that, the violent behavior, aggressive behavior, angry behavior is related to possessiveness. We think that violent behavior and aggressiveness is a strength, but actually, violence and its aggressiveness comes from a very weak point. When you are so fearful, you become, you're fearful. When you have so much of fear, you become violent. So the violence and aggressiveness is an expression of inside fear. And so without helping those people to get rid of that fear, it's difficult for us to help them to move beyond the violence. So violence is expression of a very weak point, very weakness. It's not a strength, but actually it's expression of weakness. So when we understand that whole thing, we develop kind of empathy. So those people who are acting violently, they're acting violently because they have a strong fear inside in themselves. So we need to focus on those fears and help them to get rid of those fears, and then eventually we'll be able to, help them to be not violent. And the same thing happened to us also. If you have so much of fear of losing something, losing whatever, and we can become violent too. So that's the explanation of the Buddha. So when we see those violent behaviors, it's always being threatened and being fear, and that's the expression of the fear. And so I read a very short story recently that one simple violent expressive behavior, but we can understand how this thing can happen. And one old lady one day really wanted to park his car. So she saw a parking spot in a busy parking lot, was going around and around and around. He finally saw one spot. She really wanted to park, but she was as an old lady, right? She was slow. So she slowly wanted to turn and use that parking space. And when he was slowly putting the gear and wanted to turn, and there was a young boy came and quickly parked his car in that spot. And the old lady was so disappointed and upset and frustrated, and he opened her door and asked, "Why did you do that? I'm the one who spotted that place, and I was slowly going to park there. Why did you park in that spot?" The young boy was not considering. He just told her that, "Oh, that is because I am young and fast." Because I am young and fast, and ignore the lady and then continue to walk. And this young lady got hurt her self-image. You can analyze what happened to her, like her self-image, everything. And the young boy ignored and started to walk. And after a while, the young boy heard the banging sound of his. And then when he turned around and looked, and his front part of the car was really banged, the head very badly. The old lady has, reversed her car right onto the young boy's car, and the whole front part is damaged. The young boy ran back to the old lady and asked, "Why did you do that? It looks like you purposely did that. Why did you do that?" And the young lady said, "Because I'm old and rich." So I can pay. Because earlier the young boy said that I am young and fast. That's why, I took your space, and always they say that, I happen to bump into your car because I'm old and rich. So that's how we become violent, right? So this is a kind of funny story, but actually this is how, this is what is happening to us. Our expression of behavior can be violent, but inside of us is actually our fear of losing our self-image, fear of losing our pride, fear of losing our whatever we think that belongs to us. And that whole idea of possessiveness has a very deep origin in our mind and going all the way to concepts and categories. There's much work to be done in order to get rid of violence. So no wonder the king of the Deva, Sakka, came to the Buddha and asked, everyone wants to live in harmony and concord, but we ended up being quarreling and fighting with each other. Just because we want will not happen. We really need more deeper training to look into our own working of the mind, and particularly our fears, and particularly our sense of possessiveness, and all the concepts and categories that develop that possessiveness. Maybe we still can have possessiveness, but loosely, but not too much adhering to it. That will very easily bring us to violence. So I hope that we understand this process and reflect our own mind, and then help others also to understand deeply the psychological origin of violence, and help each other to relieve our fear. If we can promise each other that I will not harm you, and people will be comfortable to live. the one practice we do as Buddhists is to, when we observe the 5 precepts, when you declare in front of, all many people, I observe this training rule not to harm and kill any living beings, you really have to say it, declare it. When you really do it, when you promise it, and all other people feel comfortable, okay, this person is promising not to harm or kill any living being, so I can be comfortable living around that person. So we really have to express, we really have to make sure that we to relieve the fear of others, because otherwise other people may see us as a threat. They can perceive anybody as a threat and then become defensive and violent. We really have to promise to each other and declare each other and express to each other that we are not going to harm anyone, and then we can relieve the fears. So let us try our best to relieve each other's fear, and then we all will become less violent and hopefully no violent. Thank you.
Any questions, brothers and sisters?
Yes, brother. Under? Other. Okay. Mm-hmm. Against them. Yeah, I think that is a real issue. So in many theistic religions, they divide the whole world into the evil and the good, or the good. So the very category of evil is so damaging to human mind and so damaging to human society. The moment you call anything evil, and then you get the kind of right to get rid of it, even to destroy it. So many so-called violent, people actually use the category of evil to first to diminish the value of those thing or the people, and then start, harming them. So, and it's really, this discrimination. I mean, we can explain what is happening in their mind using this analysis of the Buddha. What is happening in their mind? They are really happening. They have fixed concepts and ideologies. The fixed concepts and ideologies that they are not willing to even look at them. And that fixed concepts and ideologies develop certain kind of thinking, and that thinking will develop certain kind of desiring, and then dividing the whole world into 2 categories, and then wanting to get rid of or destroy the other, or what they call evil. And that is a big problem in the world, really, really. So the question we ask is how we can soften that. I think we need, education is the only answer. The education, particularly, I think I am ready to openly talk about this very dangerous category of evil. There's no such category called evil in the world. There are unhelpful things, unhealthy things, but the moment you categorize it like a permanent category is so dangerous. You can use that name to any group of people, anything, and then start to destroy it. So I think as people living in the present century, I mean, these concepts came to the world many centuries ago, and we don't know whether exactly we use in the same sense. Sometimes the meaning of these terms have been changed. I heard that even I met a theologian. Actually, he explained to me that even the idea of sin is not really the original meaning of the word sin. Is missing the mark. That you try to live in a particular way, when you fail that particular way, the missing the mark is called sin. But now there's a complete different idea of sin, right? So in that way, actually, we can eventually gradually change the meaning of the terms. So how we can soften the aggressiveness of these people is through education. Indoctrination. Yeah. But yeah, I think we have to indoctrinate them with the wholesome thing. Yeah. I think, maybe, because now, I mean, it's not an individual process. We really have to, be organized, as a society. Because there are so many indoctrination happening from those religious groups to indoctrinate the young people, particularly younger minds, and then giving that category, as I say, superiority of their own group. It could be happen not only to religion, actually, even to any other group. Indoctrinating that superiority, and then also using that the concept of the other. So I think human mind is capable of understanding this if we have enough, push, enough education. People say that actually this whole division of mind and others, the me and others, is a mental construction. And then and the whole idea of evil is dangerous. It's not really true. And then there can be helpful things and unhelpful things, and healthy things, unhealthy things. That I think is more. That should be our goal. Our task to help people to understand this very categorization happening in our mind. I don't have a clear answer. I mean, we here to just to explore the possibilities. As a sensible people, we need to be compassionate to younger generation particularly, and find ways to educate them. How we can do it, something we really have to sit down and discuss. Maybe we can use social media in a good way. Yes. They will unfriend you. Yes.
Okay, any more questions, brothers and sisters?
Yes, brother. Yeah.
For us, over the years, we know Buddhist teachers have always been very compassionate, very docile, very peaceful. Until very recently, especially in Burma, Bhante Viratu and Sri Lanka, Bhante Anasara. Now the Buddhist monks have become terrorists.
Not really terrorists.
Or at least deemed to be terrorists, violent. How do we, as Buddhists, now protect our own kind?
On?
Our own kind. I mean, how do we talk to friends, our non-Buddhists? We've got a Viratu monk who is causing trouble in Burma. You've got another monk somewhere else who's causing problems.
Yeah, use this model. Use this model. The fear. Fear is the case here. There could be actual fear, there could be perceived, like the threats, real threats or perceived threats. The fear of losing, population, fear of losing their identity. And that we need to be serious about that fear. And, we need to really work towards to see whether there's such an actual threat or a perceived threat, and help people to get rid of the fears. So, I mean, we should be really glad that Buddhists have not been violent, in many parts of the history. But we need to finally understand that Buddhists are also human beings, and they have the same weakness as all other human beings. So of course, we are supposed to transcend and overcome the human weaknesses. But if you really go and understand the actual historical context, these things have happened not within a day or two. And this is due to many social economic conditions, starting from the colonization. During the colonization period, and there was a strong suppression of indigenous religions, including Buddhism, and then so the many Buddhists in colonized countries became defensive more than other Buddhists. The reason is that their religion was systematically suppressed during the colonial period. And before the colonial period, many Asian countries had indigenous religions. They don't really have a clear distinction between religions also. Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism, Shinto, it's all kind of fluid boundaries. They didn't really have a strong division. They depends on the needs. They will, if there's a need for good harvest, they will go to such kind of deity. It doesn't matter if it belongs to which kind of religious tradition. But what happened during the colonial period, for the first time we were introduced atheistic religions and more kind of exclusive kind of religions, and the colonial power came with the religious identity, and even they were arguing that their religion is the most evolved religion, more rational religion. Therefore we have a right to convert the inhabitants. And they were arguing from the evolutionary viewpoint that they were more civilized, and those religions were more civilized religions, and then we have a right to rule you, we have a right to convert you. And then when the people in those countries first encounter this exclusive kind of religions, and they start to become self-reflective and try to create, in that case, then who we are? Maybe we are Buddhist. And they create a strong identity, and they also relate to their own religions to create their own identity, and they became defensive as a result of that. So all the colonized countries, we have defensive communities. They are very fearful. They are very concerned of any possible threats, and they become very defensive as a result of that. I'm not justifying it, but I'm explaining what has happened to those communities. So we need to come to the tables and talk, and then relieve the fear in those communities, whether Buddhists or not Buddhists.